Sir, I understand that you to be one of the most conservative members of Congress, and I appreciate that. Nonetheless,
Yes.
my concern is the $17.5 trillion of debt. That's over $50,000 per person in the United States counting infants.
And just for a second, it's actually $150,000 per taxpayer. So if you're a taxpaying member, your debt is actually a little higher because people who are not paying taxes are not going to be paying on that. But thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So when is the federal government going to live within its means? When are we going to have a balanced budget? In 1994, Newt Gingrich promised us a balanced budget amendment as part of the contract with America. At that time, the Republicans had control of Congress and the White House. Nothing happened. If I'm not mistaken, sir, you voted for the most recent budget compromise.
I did not.
I stand corrected. I thank you for it. We need people of principle to stand up for living within our means. It is absolutely unsustainable to continue spending vastly more than the tax revenue raises.
Thank you. And I'll answer your question. That's a great question. And you asked the question about what the most significant thing I have done in Congress. I'm going to talk about something that I think we have done in Congress that is good. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's better than it was when I got to Washington, D.C. I am an expert on immigration law, and probably people come to me on immigration more than anything else. But I went to Congress to fix this problem, which was the budget and the debt. Like I said in my introduction, I could have stayed home. I could have actually had a pretty good life and not traveled to Washington, D.C. every week away from my family. But I was so concerned about the issue that you're raising. Watching not just this president, but think about it. The previous president, who was a Republican, actually doubled the debt that he inherited. So it's not a problem of just Democrats. It's a problem of Republicans and Democrats who go to Washington, D.C. They make promises in their home states that they're going to tackle the debt, they're going to tackle the budget, they're going to tackle all those issues. But when they go back to Washington, D.C., they say that it's too hard. And they say that they can't actually do anything about it because they're afraid of what it really takes. Admiral Mike Mullen was asked, what is the #1 national security threat to the United States? Admiral Mike Mullen was actually the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now you would assume that an admiral who is actually leading the charge on our military would say that it's Iraq, that it's Afghanistan, that it, even maybe Mexico or Canada, just kidding. But, you know, that he might say that. But that's not what he said. Does anybody know what he said? It was our debt. Now, think about that. Why do you think that an admiral who is leading the military would say that the debt is the #1 national security? Not the #1 issue, the #1 national security threat to the United States. Why would he say that? Give me an answer. We're borrowing too much money, and there's going to come a point that we're not going to be able to afford our national defense if we continue to borrow too much money. Let me show you a couple of charts. Maybe I'm not going to show you a couple of charts. Don't get too comfortable with each other. We turn down the lights, all right? All right. So this is the first chart. This is what we're spending money on. And one of the first questions I'm going to ask you is, I assume most, if not everyone who's sitting here is saying, yeah, we have to do something about our debt. We have to do something about our spending. But the question that follows that is, what should we do? If you ask nationally whether we should actually cut spending in Washington, D.C., overwhelmingly, the American people say, what do you think? Yes. But when you ask the second question, what should we cut? What do people overwhelmingly say? Their stuff. Somebody else's program. Don't cut my program, cut somebody else's program. In fact, I spend most of my day in Washington, D.C., talking to people that are coming from Idaho to Washington, asking me as a member of Congress to please not cut their program, cut somebody else's program. That's what I spend most of my day doing, because I agree with them that their program is probably very important, but they are telling me why their program is the one program in the entire budget that should be cut. Well, if you think about that, if that's happening every single day, and I'm meeting with 5 or 6 people a day, 5 or 6 different groups, that means that I can't cut anything, because everyone's asking me to cut somebody else's program, but that person's program is asking me to not cut their program. So this is what we're spending money on. The blue is discretionary spending. Discretionary spending means the money that I actually get to budget. Every single year when we have our fights about the budget, it's not on the red stuff. It's actually on the blue stuff. Autopilot spending, or the entitlement spending, is the red stuff. That's the things that are on autopilot right now. They increase every year, and they continue to grow at an exponential rate. And they're really the drivers of our debt. Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. But even more scary than that is how big those areas are growing as they relate to the economy. We can go to the next one. Look at this chart. The red line is the revenues in the United States. Now, this is as a percentage of GDP, so we're not talking about actual dollars, we're just talking about a percentage of GDP. The red line, we just killed the budget right now. Actually, you know, ironically, they have actually done these computer models on what happens if we don't do anything to change the debt. Oh, wow. That's me. Oh. Is there a ghost in here? Yeah, okay. So they have done these computer models on what happens if we don't do anything about our debt and the computer crashes. If you don't do anything to change, so the computer model gets to a point that around the year 2050 or 2060, if we don't change the trajectory of our debt, the computer program actually crashes. So that's actually what just happened here. But so
Back up.
it's back up. Okay.
Make Doug keep holding it.
Keep going. So you have two visuals. So if you look at the red, that's just the percentage of revenue. And if you look at that since 1965, it's remained pretty constant. So we're between 18 and 21% is how much our revenues are as a percentage of GDP. But look at what has changed. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and net interest have gone from less than 5% in 1965 of GDP to a point where by the year 2025, they will actually overtake the entire budget. Now, if you go back to the previous, think about that. That means that the red stuff is going to get to a point that that's all we can afford. So we will have no money for defense and other discretionary programs. Now, can you think about what Mike Mullen said, that the debt is the #1 national security threat? He's looking at this same chart, and he realizes that if we do nothing about our debt, we are going to be in a catastrophic moment in our American history. Now, if you can go, yes. So the first question is, what have I accomplished? This is good news. It's not great news, okay? But this is good news. Look at the chart in the year 2010. That's when I was elected to Congress. In the year 2010, the annual deficit was $1.3 trillion. I went to Congress in 2010 to actually do something about the debt. The year 2011, we were still living with the budget from the previous year, which was the Democratic year. But look at what started happening in the year 2012, in the year 2013, and now in 2014. Look at what's going to happen. By the end of this year, we're going to have a deficit of only, and I say only with caution, of only $560 billion. Now that's not great, but it's much better than $1.3 trillion. But here's the scary part. If we continue the trajectory that we're on, the year 2015 is going to be even better. But if we do nothing else to change the trajectory, look at what happens to the deficits again. They start getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So we have done some things. So in your question, you said, why haven't we done anything? We have done some things, but we still need to do more. Because if we don't continue to change and reform our entitlement programs and other things that we have to do, then we're not going to be able to change the trajectory like we have. What I want to get to the point is that we have a balanced budget. I'm a big fan. There's two major pieces of legislation or amendments that I support. A balanced budget amendment, I think, is absolutely imperative. And I'm kind of tired in Washington, D.C. of hearing people in my party saying, well, I support the balanced budget amendment, but I want it to be this specific balanced budget amendment. I support all balanced budget amendments. It doesn't matter whether, there's like 5 different versions in the House. And I think what people are doing is saying, well, I support this one and not this one, so we don't really have a balanced budget. And what happens in Washington is that Republicans love to spend money, Democrats love to spend money, and Republicans love to borrow money, because what happens is that nobody wants to make the tough choices that we have to make so we can actually balance our budget. So that's number one. The second thing, and this is something that I've actually changed my mind on, when I was asked in 2010 whether I supported term limits, I said no. I thought that term limits were a bad idea because I think it's better for the people to actually change what happens in Washington. But I have changed my mind on that, and I'm actually a big supporter of term limits, and I think that if we do it, and I think I would make a modification to some of the term limits amendments that are out there. Some people want 6 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate. I would do 12 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate. I think if you can't actually get something done after 25 years, maybe you shouldn't be there. So I think that's sufficient time.
The next question comes from Vince Murray, who will be followed by Krista Kramer.
Evening, Congressman. Thanks for coming tonight.
My pleasure.
It's quite rare that someone from Washington, D.C. actually gets to a Moscow for open meetings like this. In this morning's paper, there was an article about fracking in the States. And a study out of Stanford suggests that some of the companies are penetrating through.
Can you speak just a little? Yeah.
That some of the companies are penetrating through aquifers in the ground. My question to you is, what have you done in the past, or what are you doing now to assure us that you're protecting groundwater and all water from all extractive industries in this country?
And that's a great question. I'm not an expert on fracking, but I've done a little bit of research. In my office has done quite a bit of research on fracking. And we have looked at all the studies, especially by the EPA and other agencies, and there's no actual direct correlation between, you have all seen the videos out there, where there's fracking and then all of a sudden the water turns to fire and things like that. There haven't been any studies that find a direct correlation between fracking and those incidents. So the only thing that I have been able to do is get as much information as possible. Every time somebody sends me new information on it, we make sure that we do the research to make sure. So I haven't seen any data that supports the fact that fracking is actually creating groundwater issues. But I am just as concerned as you are, and that's why every time we hear something new, we make sure that we study it.
Did I ask you, looked at that Stanford study? It just came out just this past few days. There was a study.
Yeah. Can you give Doug right there that information? That would be great. Thank you very much.
Yes, the next speaker will be Krista Kramer, followed by Steve Flynn.
Congressman, welcome.
Thank you.
I was looking at your